Mrs. Irani is the country's youngest Union Cabinet Minister and the first woman to hold office as Minister for Education and Minister for Textiles. She has also served previously as the Minister for Information and Broadcasting. Mrs. Irani was elected to the Rajya Sabha in 2011. 6 years later, in August 2017, she was re-elected to Rajya Sabha. Her entry into Lok Sabha was even more dramatic. During the elections, general elections of 2019, Mrs. Irani vanquished the Congress in one of its traditional strongholds of Amethi in UP. And like she was just explaining to me, saying that she didn't go to Amethi to just win an election. It was about upsetting, about breaking something that has been, the norm. At the recent G20 meet, Mrs. Irani stressed that to be future ready, we need to make sure that women are at the center of the discourse, and that exactly is what her ministry seeks to achieve. With people-centric programs like Mission Saksham, Anganwadi, and Poshan 2.0, the Ministry of Women and Child Development strives to benefit 2 lakh Anganwadi centers. Under the guidance of the minister, an enabling environment has been created to nurture health, wellness, and immunity of women and children. For instance, the Poshan Tracker app is for real-time monitoring of supplementary nutrition and prompt supervision of services. The minister is also monitoring other key initiatives of the ministry like Mission Shakti for safety and security of women and Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao scheme, which has helped improve sex ratio at birth by 16 points at the national level from 918 in 2014-15 to 934 in FY22. Skilling is in non-traditional livelihoods for adolescent girls or Betiyan Bane Kaushal is one of the agenda of the government driven by Mrs. Irani. One of the key initiatives taken by the ministry is the notification of adoption regulations, which seeks to fast-track the process of adoption of children. I would like to now invite the Honorable Minister, Mrs. Irani, for a discussion. Our original agenda for the evening was an address by Mrs. Irani, but at her request, we are now going to have a discussion. There's going to be an opportunity for the audience, and she's going to be open to taking questions from the audience in a brief while. We'll have a quick discussion, and then, please do prepare your questions for Mrs. Irani. Ma'am, please. Ma'am, thank you. Thank you for being here. The rise of the she economy is the theme of our Most Powerful Women Awards this evening. I wanted to start off with that theme, as you had also suggested. What is your assessment of the Indian economy and the rise of the she economy within the economy? Following that, I would also like to understand from you, in the budget, what is it that you would like to tell us about the work that has been, that will go on from here on, or your ministry is introducing in the area of your ministry, Women and Child Development?
Thank you, Rajiv, for the conversation. At the onset, I will take exception to the terminology she economy. Because to presume that we as women will not be interested in the economy as a whole, the we economy, I think is the greatest disservice you do to every female professional or every female citizen of the country. When you talk about the budget, I think that the impression one carries is that the Women's Agency is the responsibility of the Ministry of Women and Child Development alone. For years on end, I have said on many public platforms that till such time it becomes the agency of every gender, every family, you will not see the transition that you're hoping for. And that is why, as a professional politician, as a minister, one of my greatest joys is that the Prime Minister of India leads changes with regards to the Women's Agency. if you look at the immediate past, the G20 presidency, we recently had a W20 meeting in Sambhajinagar, and the lady who began the initiative of W20 said that the initiative was initiated by this group of people from Turkey because they felt that the G20 presidency or the G20 community needed to discuss women's issues, and they did so at the sidelines. They were extremely elated that now the G20 presidency of India brings the women's issues to the main table. And the deliberation at the W20 was that, are we genuinely needed? Because now we have the Indian Prime Minister talking about development economics from the perspective of women and how we are imperative as a gender to a nation's holistic growth. I also believe that when you look at the agency of women, as you so call it, from an administrative perspective, this year, we've had in totality across 60 departments an allocation of over 2,23,000 crores. Only for projects which are dedicated to women's needs. But what I am extremely happy about is that out of the 43 departments that were to report the gender budget, I have till now received the gender budget reporting from 41 departments already, which means that there is a fiscal discipline with regards to gender justice, which is now a permanent part of governance at the center. What I'm extremely also joyful about is that the 15th Finance Commission for the first time now has spend tied to gender justice across all panchayats in our country. This tie of funds on the basis of spend for gender is not limited to female-led panchayats. It is now an imperative for every panchayat that a particular amount in the budget has to be spent on issues which women deem fit within the panchayat. This has not happened anywhere in the world. And I think as Indians, we should be very proud that our governance system today does not centralize the spend for the agency of women only at the top, does not talk about it only at the state government level, but now there is a fiscal hierarchy in the country where even the panchayats now have developed the habit of gender spend, which is a huge, I think, achievement. It is a silent revolution which has not found mention, I think, in any pink paper.
In our discussion just now, I was mentioning to you, for instance, that, you know, we do the best CEOs list. We do many of these lists, like the next 500. Very rarely do we find women CEOs.
And I think I found the answer in the panel that was before me. I don't know where Ajita is. She should be given a separate award this evening. And I'll tell you why. She politely asked a question, and my respects to all the gentlemen who are on the panel, as to why hire a female leader in a corporate entity. And the response was, because we are nurturing. I didn't go to Amethi because I was nurturing. I was sent because I was the most combative individual the BJP had. And when you're picking the top CEOs, I'm sure in your list of talents, none of the CEOs are supposed to report how nurturing they are. So if organizations are going to pick female leaders as to how compliant they are, how submissive they are, and how nice they are, then you possibly will not find them mentioned at the top echelons of corporate power. And I think that is what needs reflection. That why is it that we want to find amiable women in boardrooms who don't make much of a noise? Why can't we withstand that cantankerous woman who makes sense, and you only, in hindsight, lament the fact you wish you had listened to that cantankerous woman with this huge, rapturous voice who was trying to drill some sense into you? And I think when we start giving those women positions of power within corporate entities, then your top 100 CEOs trust me, Rajiv, you will need a different men's section. Because they are women with that capacity. The question is, where are the men hiring them?
Now, women representation on company boards has been, it's a law.
None of the women who are seated here or possibly read Fortune magazine are talking about a reservation for combative women in companies.
Yes, that's true.
All they want is somebody with the capacity to withstand their sheer energy, their sheer talent. And I believe that if that sheer capacity exists in the HR segment and that capacity exists in accepting a tenacious woman in the hierarchy, I think that you will see astounding results. Because if you speak of women in management structures or in organizations, ask any woman what are the challenges we face according to our age. If we are in our 20s, we are told that you're young and inexperienced. Thoda sa patience hona chahiye. If you're in your 30s, you are told, Arey, didn't you just get married? Aren't you going to have a baby? Oh, if you're not having a baby, what's wrong with you? If you're in your 40s, you're told, don't you want to mentor the 20-year-old? And we are looking for young blood. If you're in your 50s, you're told, do you want to mentor the 30-year-old? If you're 60, you're dead because they're like, we want the 20-year-olds. So it doesn't matter which decade our professional life is transitioning to. What matters is, who's that individual in a company who looks at a woman and says, this is the combative, or for that matter, this is the balance of talent and this is the balance of tenacity that I want in my company. The problem is, when you're combative, people feel that you're like a bull in a china shop. But the fact that a woman is combative, may be prone to failure, is not easily digested. A combative man can fail. A combative woman, if she fails.
So
all the women are nodding. Half the men are red-faced. That means I'm saying something which makes sense and resonates. Yes.
The issue of women representation on the company boards and the massive challenge still to find the right...
You can't find women? Seriously?
How do you bring about this? How do you bring about a change? And is there something that the government can do?
Let's get men some good reading glasses and looking glasses. Because in a billion-plus country, where, let me give you another example. I have many women in business seated here. But before 2014, if somebody told you that a woman with a rural enterprise can make a business plan, go to a bank, submit it, get approvals, get credit support, come out, ensure that she services her loan well, pays it back, has 0 NPA, and suddenly India will have 230 million such women, you would not believe it. But with Mudra loans, which was not a gendered loan, 70% of the beneficiaries ended up being women. And what were the number of loans given out? 320 million. Which means that over 200 million women in this country have made a cause for what women can do in business. And you're telling me from 200 million women, you can't find women good enough to be on boards? Good enough to be in leadership positions?
So it has to go down to the entrepreneurs and the creators, really.
I think that there is again an assumption that education will bring about a huge change as to how women are perceived.
Yes.
But has it? Again, Ajita is here, brave lady, because she asked one question today. And she's now embarrassed because I'm naming her time and again. She is embarrassed because she asked a question, and I don't know whether the gentleman is in the house. My apologies to him. As to how did you make your appliance company more gender friendly? Women in the front row all heard how the color of the appliance was changed to rose gold.
Yes.
Now, as a woman who's working, 2 kids, 1 kid just got married, if you tell me what do I want out of a toaster, I don't care whether it's rose gold, black or blue. I care whether it was toasting at 1 minute and now can toast in 30 seconds because I have absolutely no time. But that question was being answered by an industry leader. So can I expect him to then appoint a woman to a board? Unless she's wearing rose gold, I guess not.
Ma'am, women in politics. Is politics gender biased?
Not at all. Otherwise, a battle axe like me would not be minister consistently for 9 years.
So, should we see more women representation in politics at all levels?
Today, if you look at politics, how do you define female leadership? Of the 3 million women in political offices in the grassroots across the world, 1.4 million women, political leaders at the grassroots, are in India. But they do not get counted by the World Economic Forum in the Global Gender Gap Index. What is fascinating is that the Global Gender Gap Index not only discounts 1.4 million women in India who are voted to office, it discounts female MLAs, it discounts female ministers in state governments, it discounts female MPs, it discounts and does not take into consideration even ministers in the Council of Ministers of Government of India. Now, by sheer the mathematical magic, if you look at counting of these 1.4 million women panchayat leaders, MLAs, MPs, ministers, suddenly India will get ranked higher only on the issue of political equity. It's like the Global Hunger Index. Pakistan does better than us, but Pakistanis are looking for atta, and here in India, we're delivering food to 80 crore people for the past 2.5 years free of cost. We have Gallup calling up Indians and saying, "Bhook lagi hai kya?" I mean, I've not eaten since morning. I've just had 2 cups of cappuccino. You call me, I'll say, "Haan, lagi hai." And suddenly, my name will be tick marked as hungry in India.
What, in your opinion, can digital entrepreneurs do, for instance, to collaborate and handhold the startups, especially women entrepreneurs, because that is going to be really the game changer?
I think that if you want to service the agency of women from a digital entrepreneurship perspective, there are 3 things that we need to do. When the Prime Minister gave the clarion call for Digital India in 2014, there are many who scoffed at him and said, how will you see this percolation of the so-called skill set in the digital world in a landscape which is predominantly rural? We have 622,000 plus villages in our country. What the pandemic did was prove to the global world order that we can adapt and adopt technology with alacrity when need be. How do you service the agency of women? Today, in a country of 800 million plus internet users, the number of women who use the internet is comparatively low. And one of the challenges is not that they don't know how to use the internet, but the internet is not available in their language of choice. So if we start in a country with 16,000 dialects, 125 constitutionally recognized languages, digital solutions in localized linguistic capacities, I think you will service and find more and more women then partake in the joy of the internet and then also help expand their business opportunities. It is not only a win-win for women, it's also a win-win for business.
One of the areas in which women entrepreneurship is really inspiring is the credit culture in the country, self-help groups, and it is also a very assuring or reassuring feeling for many of the small finance banks and others who are dealing with SHGs that women are indeed leading this and creating that self of assurance to the finance companies that these are their money is safe. What is your sense of other sectors other than this, where we are already seeing a very significant impact, where this can be, where there could be a ripple effect, where this could be created, and whether the government or private enterprises can come together and do something about it?
So if you reflect on the budget pronouncements, it does talk about creating clusters out of self-help group. If you have studied ever the budget lines across the Government of India per year for the past 8 years, you will recognize that collectively across 50 to 55 departments, self-help groups receive credit support worth over 1 lakh crore every year. Only the Ministry of Rural Development can quantify that in the past 8 years, they have transitioned close to 5 lakh crore rupees from the Indian Treasury to the bank accounts of close to 8 million self-help groups and 9 crore women. Which means that yearly now we have fundamental research available as to how this conglomerate of women, between 30 to 32 billion is the kind of monies that they deal with, that they circulate and they service. Which means that there are 3 things that they're capable of. 1, they understand money, they manage it well, and there is a fiscal discipline all of them have displayed, because rarely have I heard of a self-help group failing to pay back, which is a big skill set in the fiscal world. Second is, they are managing this money because they are indulging in local production of some agro-processing unit, or for that matter, some home-based industry. Which means that you have consistently a number of women now, close to 1 decade, who have created that rural and circular economy. Third, these women in self-help groups have shown a propensity not only to save, but their spend on education and health within the family unit is escalated when it compares to other male spenders. So you have women who save, you have women who know finance, and you have women who are good spenders. So from an economic point of view, we now know that you have 200 million plus women in the Mudra Yojana, that you have 9 crore women, which is 90 million women in the self-help group sphere. And at the same time, you have a combine of these, which now have become the entry level in the SME segment. What we now need to do, and I'm hopeful that industry leaders do this, is to pick possibly industrial area-wise, or those who depend and have an agency or an organization that can service craft-based industry, is to bring them together and see which segment of this can transition into mid-sized companies.
Sure.
If we do that, I think we'll do a great service to the female entrepreneurial skill of our country.
Yeah, I think this hall is full of very awe-inspiring leadership, and I'm sure they will take note of it. Before I, open this floor for questions from the audience, ma'am, would you like to announce about the discussion?
So I got a bit peeved, and somebody I really, really admire and love is in the audience right now. She is here, but she didn't see me when I was peeved. Before she got here, we had a panel of gentlemen who spoke about how they hire women because we are very, very nurturing and not combative. And her eyebrows just went, what? So I'm happy to announce, Ajita, given the grace with which you handle those comebacks from the gentlemen, that between the Ministry of Women and Child Development and the team at Fortune, I would genuinely want to research as to why Fortune magazine, when it goes looking for the top 100 CEOs in the country, does not find women. What are those attributes?
Thank
that
you, ma'am.
we now need to reach out to organizations and tell them that maybe they're a bit skewed in terms of how they recognize that leadership skill, or what are those attributes that women need to imbibe in the workforce, what are those attributes that negate circumstances for women to be promoted into positions of power and positions where there's more money and spending power in a company. So I'm hopeful that between the two organizations, we can find some useful pointers for the way ahead.
We'll most definitely work on this. Thank you so much for this honor. I would like to open the floor for questions, if there are any from audience.
Well, the women are smiling and laughing. I don't know whether men have any questions.
Any questions? Anybody, please raise your hand. Yes, ma'am, there.
Hello, ma'am. A huge fan, so I'm having a fangirl moment right now. I'm Gopali. I work for Accenture, and have been through some of these journeys that you spoke about, right, in terms of rejection, etc. My question to you is, how do you make the change, right, at the grassroots level? I have 2 boys, and I'm trying to raise them differently. But I think the mindset has to change, whether it's a woman or a man, right? Even as a mother, my mindset has to change in the way I raise my boys. What is your point of view on that, ma'am?
I think that you're absolutely right that the change has to begin from families. Change also has to begin from how we help children develop their cognitive skills. So while we are looking now at more and more possibilities, I mean, the dichotomy is that 46% of STEM graduates in India are women. But if you look at their transition into science-based enterprise, it's less than 30%. And that happens because you can possibly push only up to a certain level when it comes to women and science, but it's very rare when such women are taught how to commercialize their innovation. Now, when we did a research on this particular aspect, we found that when a toy is introduced to a child, how many of us give building blocks and a truck to a girl, vis-a-vis how many of us give it to a boy child? How many of us sit and talk maths with a girl child as compared to what we do to the boy child? How many of us tell the girl child, okay, it's lovely to wear pink and hence set a color tone in her head, as compared to how many of us actually do not denote a color to a boy child? So though the methodology sounds very simple, that it's about raising a culture, the complexity is in the little crevices in which bias hides. So many a times we don't intend to be biased. Many a times we possibly mean nurturing is a big compliment, but we do not realize how we are manifesting a bias, and that bias then carries forward. So I think that as a mother, you've at least begun right by saying, I need to decide that I want that change coming from home. And I also think that apart from home spaces, we also need to ensure that the education around gender is something that is diversely proportionate to the kind of population we have. For instance, if and when Women's Day comes closer, everybody that you know will talk about this woman broke the glass ceiling, that woman broke the glass ceiling. But ask them, where did the term glass ceiling come from? It came from a management consultant 45 years ago. Why? Because her boss told her, you're good, but you need to smile more. It came because she wanted somebody to have sexual harassment laws at her workplace. And the United States of America then was bereft of such a strong law. Now look back. The law for prevention of sexual harassment at workplace came in 2013. But if you actually read the Arthashastra, in that there is a law denoted punishment by the king to an individual who has gone from the treasury side to a family or to the workplace of a woman and has harassed that woman. What is the punishment that the king should mete out to such an individual, which means sexual harassment law at workplace finds a mention in the Arthashastra. But how many of us talk about it? There'll be absolutely no mention about it. There will be a conversation about glass ceiling. Vis-a-vis a country where from the day that we were a democratic nation constitutionally, women and men had equal rights to vote. We compare ourselves to nations where women had to tie themselves to benches in parliament so that they could get the right to vote. So how many decades have we lost comparing apples and oranges?
Thank you so much.
Can we take, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I am Pushpa Shah, Chartered Accountant. Ma'am, I want to ask you, what are the tips you would like to give to women who want to rise in the political leadership, and what attributes they should have, and how their voice can be heard?
Have you ever seen a man ask a man for advice? I think the greatest compliment you can pay to the female kind, especially in politics, is to recognize that absolutely no male politician has ever gotten up and asked no male politician, tell me how to go ahead. I think there needs to be a recognition that you have significant talent to rise in politics on your own. Just when you want to compete, don't compete with only women. Find the best man that you can also beat only on the basis of your talent.
Ms. Sambani has a question.
So, Smriti ji, just in continuation of, it's just a remark of what you were saying, is that I think we need to educate both our boys and our girls. When I started working at the refinery 30 years ago and wore a hard hat, they all called me sir. And I had to keep on telling them I'm not a sir, you know. But it was impossible. It was all men team. So for them to understand that there's a woman there working on with a hard hat is difficult. So if you want to raise your girls and boys equally, I think the imaging on TV, on advertisements, on movies, that has to change, because it's being consumed all over India by all these young minds. So I think as a group together, each woman needs to kind of look how we can educate our kids equally. So that was my only remark, I thought.
And I think it's interesting when you say that when you wore that hard hat, you were called sir, because that was an image of a person with power. That was the image of a person with technological know-how. That was the image of a person with purpose. And the only linguistic possibly image that would resonate in that individual's mind was sir. So I think the fact that now, and it happens to women in uniform, it happens at times to even ministers like me. And I think that you're right that one, the language capacities and complexities in terms of the balance of power is essential. How women are perceived and young women are perceived is extremely essential. Also, I think conversations about women is very essential, and those conversations need help not only in family circumstances, they definitely need help even at workplaces and organizations. Because many a times I feel that people unknowingly at times seep in a bias. I think the pandemic has been a big revelation, because before the pandemic, after pregnancy, if a woman said, I will work from home, it was a death knell for her career. It was literally a lovely farewell we gave to female professionals. The pandemic got men working from home, and suddenly it was kosher for the entire industry. So I think that from coming from a time where a lady with a hard hat today to a lady who doesn't need a hard hat but still exudes power, you've come a long way.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, please.
So this is slightly a personal question, but just to get some advice. So I've been working for the last 25 years, and you know, I love the job, but of course need the income, you know, to give the life for. I have 2 kids. I've been quite inspired today seeing so many, you know, entrepreneurial women.
What's your name?
My name is Somani. So I'm very inspired, but I don't think I have the guts to drop the job and become an entrepreneur. I work like an entrepreneur, but I need that monthly income at the end of the month. So, I mean, what would you advise?
So I come in 1998, when the first McDonald's opened in Bandra. I used to work there sweeping floors. I made $1,500. So I know exactly what you feel. And before that, when I got Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, I had my last $200. But that job paid $300 more than the McDonald's job. The issue is that it's lovely for politicians like me or other thought leaders to talk about it, but inspiration and aspiration, that journey in between those two words, is a tough one and costly one. There's a personal cost to it. So I'll be very blunt. If you're happy to pay that personal cost, by all means, run to the aspiration. But if you want to be pragmatic because you have 2 kids, because I made that run before I got married and I had 2 kids. So the fact that you're a conscientious parent is a compliment to you as a human being. I think many women have the capacity to lead, but curtail themselves because they are more tied into their responsibilities, and there's a cost to that ambition. And the toughest sacrifice is sacrificing your own ambitions, knowing you have the talent, so that your kids can sustain themselves. So my compliments, my best wishes. If you can afford it, make a run to that aspiration. And if you can't, somebody in this room someday will hire you or support you to make that dream happen. I believe this. Otherwise, you would have never gotten up and asked me this question, because it takes a lot of courage to expose yourself as a professional, stand up and admit that about yourself. So you've taken the first step. Before you run, that's your first step.
Thank you. Thank you.